Welcome back to another episode of Casual Conversations. I'm very excited about today's guest. I have author Jordan Schwarz here with us, and Jordan wrote the book Echo's Promise. Jordan's going to talk to us about the book. We're going to talk about the editing process. We're going to talk about the publishing process, and hopefully, when you walk away from this, you have purchased Jordan's book and you have learned that if you want to publish a book, it's not as hard as you might think it is. Jordan, welcome to the show. Thank you for agreeing to come on with me today.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind, could you give us kind of the elevator pitch about what is Echo's Promise all about?
Okay. Well, Echo's Promise is a science fiction adventure, and it's something that I developed with young readers in mind. I have a daughter who is 10 years old, and I wasn't sure how long it would take me to write the book, but I was writing it thinking that she might be ready to read it by the time that I was done. And so what I have is really a science fiction adventure, a space opera kind of book that's aimed at young readers, probably from teenage years up to young adult. But really, it's something for readers of any age to read and enjoy. The plot line in Echo's Promise is that there are two children who are on Earth when Earth becomes the subject of a galactic invasion. And they're lucky enough to get out in time with their parents, and their parents take them to a space station and then are trying to figure out, okay, we're stuck on the space station. What's the next step? And they figure that out, or their parents figure it out for them, and they then depart on a space liner to head to their next destination, which turns out to be this very distant planet called Echo. Now, things go pretty far wrong along the way, and without giving away too much of the plot, will say that the children and some others that they meet form a cohort and have to take control of the ship and take control of their circumstances in order to find their way to Echo and be reunited with their parents. So there's a lot of twists along the way. It's sort of a situation where the conflict that they try to escape ends up following them. And I thought that was an interesting concept. So that in a brief nutshell is what the book is about.
Okay. And Jordan, what was your motivation to write this book?
Well, I had a couple different motivations. One was that my family reads a lot. My wife and I read to our daughter pretty much every night. And after a while, I felt like I was reading the same book over and over again. And so I was ready to read something different. And I had this idea in my head for a plot line that I thought was interesting. And I thought, well, there's nothing stopping me. Why don't I write this thing? And there certainly was an element of current events in my mind as well. I was thinking about what was happening in Ukraine at the time, and the war that sort of swallowed up a country and really took a lot of people by surprise. And there are elements of my family history that also kind of have that as a common theme. So I was trying to think about for people my daughter's age or slightly older, how do you explain something like this to kids or to teens? How do you explain what happens when there's a war going on and people are displaced? And so I thought that would be interesting to turn into a book. I also didn't want to make the book too heavy. So there are elements that are fairly light to it. I kind of tried to alternate in the chapters between light and dark, and there's definitely some comedic chapters thrown in to try and keep it from dragging the reader through the mud. But those were some of the inspirations. And then another inspiration was Robert Heinlein. I read Heinlein a lot as a kid. He was another writer who was a science fiction legend and wrote for adults, but he also wrote for teenage readers. And one of his books I revisited as an adult and felt like I found some flaws in it. You take a 1953 perspective, and from a cultural literacy standpoint, some of the things that he was saying, I just didn't agree with anymore. So the book was an opportunity for me to present maybe a more updated worldview while still taking Heinlein's idea of a space opera or space adventure where the kids are the heroes and taking that and kind of updating it for a modern audience.
Okay. So, having said that, is there another book? Could this potentially be a series?
I think it's going to be a series because my daughter has asked me to make it a series. Uh, and I am in the process of writing a follow-up book. I definitely did not finish all of my plot lines in the first one, so there's more material there. But what I'm finding is that the second book is harder to write than the first. For the first one, I felt like I just had a really innate sense of where I wanted to go with the book, and I just had to find a way of getting it down on paper. The second one, I feel like I'm having to invent the plot a little bit more, and that's a different process. So it's definitely been slower going, but it'll happen eventually. It just may take me some more time.
Okay. It's interesting. You're not the only author that I've spoken to who has said that the second book is harder. So just, random thought here that I'm sure has not crossed your daughter's mind at all, but any thoughts about having her contribute?
That's a great idea, John. Certainly something I should ask her about. I'll take free help, and one thing that I have certainly learned by being a parent is that our kids are just unbelievably creative. The level of creativity they have versus adults. As adults, we sort of seem to inadvertently impose limits on our creativity. Oh, that solution won't work because it's too expensive, or that's not realistic. Well, you ask kids for help, and they're limitless, and it's a real gift to be able to be around kids when they're that age, because they can come up with creative solutions that we just can't even think of. So yeah, that's a great idea.
I agree with everything that you've just said. And just full disclosure for the audience, Jordan and I are friends as well. We met at church and became, friends throughout that. So I know his daughter, and she is as smart as she is adorable. And I can only imagine, because one of my greatest joys is just hanging out with my daughters and having conversations with them. And for my birthday a couple years back, we went to downtown Detroit and rented scooters, and we just scooted all around downtown Detroit, just hanging out, enjoying the city, doing whatever. And the most enjoyable part of that wasn't the scooter ride. It was the conversations. My youngest daughter rode on the scooter with me, and the conversations that we were having all over the city were just absolutely phenomenal. So I think it would make a great book if if you chose to go that path. Um, so, Jordan, just you talked about the writing process a little bit, about how the second book is harder than the first. How much time do you think you dedicated to writing the first book?
The first book took me about a year from start to finish in terms of just getting it written down and then going through the production and publication process. During that year, I was writing for between 1 and 2 hours a night. And once I finished the primary writing, I was still working on the book for 1 or 2 hours a night. So, rough math, say 300 days a year times 2 hours, so 600 hours. Compare that to what you would spend on a full-time job, 2,080 hours a year. So it's about a third of a job in terms of the amount of time that you're investing in it. It is kind of, it's definitely an occupation, but it's something that's also very enjoyable. And am not a, I, I'm not somebody with a technical background in writing. Had classes in college, and those certainly helped to spark my interest and maybe give me a little bit more technical ability. But it was something where I don't have a degree in literature or in creative writing or anything like that. It's something more where I've figured it out as I've gone along, and I certainly hear from people and believe that the more you do it, the better you'll get. And you just look at people who pursue any creative passion, whether it is being a songwriter or a musician, or in this case, a book writer or an artist. And it's just something that has to be practiced. And
Okay.
writing is very much the same way. So uh, I I may not be the world's greatest writer, but I think that I will get better with everything that I write.
I agree. I think that's true. I started writing consistently back, I think, in March of 2021, and just started sitting down every day and just either journaling or writing something for publication. And I go back and I look at it because I've saved all of it. Some of it is embarrassingly on my website, and I can see the change. I can see
Hmm.
where I started, how I was composing sentences and ideas, and I look at it now, and to this day, I'll go out and I'll every single day, I will go back and I'll read what I wrote a year ago, and then what I wrote 2 years ago, and I can see the difference, and not just the difference in my writing, but the difference in my thought processes and how I'm taking different ideas and going different places with them. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that's great advice for somebody who has this idea, has this dream, is just start writing, and it may not be great, but you'll get better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely important to be able to take the first step and just start writing things down. Um, I find that I can't go back and look at my old writing without wanting to revise something. As you said, you get better, and you go back and look at it differently. So at a certain point, you do have to put a bow on it and say, okay, well, I'm done with that, and time to work on the next project. But uh, yeah, definitely, it's a skill that's developed as opposed to something where you're just born into it, a natural writer.
Yeah. So you talked about the time investment, which and I like the way your engineer mind works, that you break it down into how much of a job is it. So how much out-of-pocket expense did you have when through this whole process of publishing the book?
So, one of the out of pocket expenses that you want to have when self publishing is to purchase an ISBN number for your book. An ISBN is a serial number for your book, it's a unique identifier, kind of like a social security number. And every book has one on the back by the barcode. I'll just hold it up there, and you can see the barcode there. And then the ISBN is the number that's right there at the top of it. Those ISBNs cost some money to get. Um, the more of them you order at once, the less expensive they are. So somewhere between $30 and $100 for an ISBN. And that way your book has a unique identifier that you own, and it just kind of attaches that book to you forever.
Okay.
Uh, I would consider that a mandatory expense for somebody who is writing and self-publishing. There are ways to get an ISBN for free. For example, the service that I'm using to publish the book is Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing service. And you can actually get an ISBN from Kindle. Uh, but if they give you the ISBN for free, they take certain rights to the book in exchange, like rights to exclusive publication. And I generally recommend against that. In the off chance that you want to do something with your book of a different kind, you want to turn it into a screenplay, or you get picked up by a movie producer who wants to turn it into a screenplay, you want that work to be yours. And so between $30 and $100 is a small price to pay for ownership of that work that you've worked so hard to create. That's my opinion on it. Now, you can certainly spend more on the books when you start talking about hiring artists for cover art or for artwork in the book, hiring editors, which you can do to help proofread the book, and then marketing. Uh, those costs can climb into the thousands. And I'm not there. I was kind of doing this book as more of a personal creative pursuit than anything else. But I have read that for people who are serious self publishers and are really looking to monetize their self publishing works, that the investment is between $3,000 and $10,000 to get to that point. And a lot of that is marketing costs and website, social media presence, and that kind of thing too.
Okay. Well, so how about like proofreading? Like who does the editing for you?
At least for this one, for Echo's Promise, we did a lot of the proofreading as a family. I wanted to read the book to my daughter anyway, and so that provided an opportunity to proofread the book while we were reading it. But what I did was I had a couple of draft copies printed up, and my wife read the book back to me and my daughter. And I had another copy and a red pen and was constantly marking it up and taking their feedback. One of the things that happens when you have somebody else read your book, particularly when you have them read it out loud, is that you hear the book as it's read by somebody else's voice. When I'm writing the book, I hear my voice reading every sentence in the book, and I have my idea of exactly how it's supposed to sound. When somebody else reads it, you hear them trip over certain sentences or find tongue twisters that you didn't realize you had written into the book. And you certainly have the benefit of somebody who can point out that plot line there doesn't make sense, or this sentence here just needs to be moved to a different part. So it's so that was a helpful experience for editing the book. And editing the book out loud is a consistent recommendation, something where either you or somebody else read the book back out loud just to hear how it sounds. It's a different experience than when you're just reading it in your head, and that almost becomes more of a skimming exercise where it doesn't. Your brain is sort of processing the words faster than you can read them. But when you actually read them out, you can hear things, and it forces you to go over every word in the book and make sure it makes sense. So that was how we edited that one. Had I not had the benefit of my family on hand, though, I would have certainly contracted it out to an editor.
Okay, so those options do exist.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Everything in the self-publishing business is set up so that you can pay as much money as you want to have other people do the process for you. Editing is definitely available. It will cost a few $100s probably to get a book edited professionally, but it's absolutely doable.
Okay. And we haven't really got into that yet, that piece of it, the self-publishing piece. And I know that you used Amazon to publish yours, and your book is available for sale on Amazon if anybody wants to go out there and buy it. Can you talk us through what that process looks like, how easy that process is, how hard it is? And I'm going to pop an image of your book up here on the screen.
Okay. One of the things about the self-publishing process is that it is a process. There are multiple steps in the process. So there's the actual creation of the manuscript and the editing of that manuscript, which we talked about. And then once you've got a final manuscript, then what comes next? Well, you have to get printed copies. And so you line up a publishing house, you format the pages for printing, you get proof copies to look at how the book is actually printing, make sure everything is the way you want it. Then there's the distribution aspect and marketing and sales. And where I'm going with this is the reason why Amazon was an attractive option was because Amazon is a vertically integrated source for those different steps in the process. Some authors choose to do those different steps independently. So I know some authors who go through a print house and they handle their own marketing and distribution, and they run their own website to sell books out of. But where Amazon makes it easy is that you can do much of the production process without ever leaving Amazon's website. So you can do printing, which they contract out, but it's very well done. And then you have the marketing and distribution. You have ebook distribution through Kindle. Amazon is gigantic and everybody knows it. And so you just have access to a very large network that way. And the pricing is competitive, both in terms of print copies and in terms of the distribution costs. So it has definitely made the process easier than it used to be. You may have heard about these publishing companies called vanity publishers. Vanity publishers are ones that will offer to publish your work in exchange for a commission. The nice thing is that there are companies now, Amazon is one, and there are a few others that are similar, where they don't charge you a commission for your work. You can just write something and put it out there, and if it sells, you make money, and if it doesn't sell, you don't really lose anything. So that was how I worked my way around to Amazon. I did look at a few other options. There are definitely some other publishing houses out there. HarperCollins has one. There's even a local book printer here in the Michigan area that some authors use to print their books and then distribute them through other channels. So there's a lot of different ways to do the process, but Amazon was efficient for me.
Okay. So a quick question about the vanity publishing. I don't know if I'm correct on this or not, but in my research to publish, I've come across a couple places that essentially you pay them to publish your book, and in exchange, they guarantee you a bestseller spot on, Amazon or wherever. And essentially, the trick there is they publish your book under a niche and then hyper market it the week that it launches. And that's really what you're paying for, is to get that sticker on there. Is that the same thing as the vanity publishing?
That's certainly an example of a vanity publisher. Yeah. If you're paying up front for them to publish your title, then it is a vanity publisher.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's a different business model. There's really three business models out there, because there's the vanity model, there's the self-publishing model that Amazon uses, and then there's the traditional model. And what traditional means is that you're not able to approach one of the major publishers directly, but you have to get picked up by an agent. And then that agent represents your book and effectively owns the content, or at least the rights to market that book to publishers. Traditional is worth talking about here because it's kind of a binary decision whether to go the traditional route or not. What I mean by that is, if you plan to go the traditional publishing route, and there's some reasons why you might want to do that, but if you plan to go that route, you don't want to self-publish your book. Traditional publishers are looking for content which really hasn't appeared before. They want exclusive access to it. And so if you've self-published the book, it means that it's already out there in some form. And generally, publishers will avoid it. The exception to that is if it's a self-published work that already is selling extremely well. And by extremely well, I mean tens of thousands of copies. The threshold to be a bestseller is probably minimum 10,000. And so if you have a book that goes viral and it sells 10,000 copies, you might start to get interest from publishers in picking that book up. For most people, it doesn't work that way. For very few people, it doesn't work that way. And so the traditional publishing route usually is shopping your book to agents, perhaps for years, and then lining it up with a publisher and going through their production process and their editing process, which can also take years. And so the time from when you finish the book to when you're actually seeing it printed and available to the public, that time span varies greatly, but it could be anywhere from months to years. If you are part of the British royal family, they're going to do their best to rush that book out so that they can get it out to the public and make lots of money off of it. But for a lot of people, that process is going to be 3 to 5 years. And so that's one of the great things about self-publishing, is that you have the immediacy, if that's important to you, of being able to get your book out there. And in my case, that was a factor, since it at least tied into current events and it was targeted toward a certain age. I felt like having it relatively immediate was a priority for me. traditional publishing, in terms of profitability, could be more profitable for an author, but you have to get picked up by an agent and a publisher first. And the chances of that happening are quite low. Anecdotally, maybe 1 in 6,000. So just being noticed by an agent is a very difficult process in and of itself. It's a lot like sending resumes. You send off a lot of pitches to agents and never hear anything back. And so it's also a very open-ended process. You don't really know, are they paying attention to you? Are they going to write back? When am I done? So that's one reason why I went the traditional publishing route. The other thing that's nice about self-publishing is that going through agency representation acts as a kind of filter. And to an extent, that's a good thing. Agents filter works for content and quality, and they also filter it for what's going to sell well in the marketplace. If you have a book that's kind of unique and doesn't fit into a nice, obvious niche, it might spook the agents a little bit. It might be hard to sell. And I almost felt like mine fell into that category a little bit. Science fiction was very hot in the 50s and 60s. It goes in phases now. If there's a good science fiction movie that comes out, everybody gets excited about science fiction for a little while. But it's not always an evergreen theme in terms of being attractive to readers. So it's a tougher sell. And I looked at a lot of agent pages to see what kind of genres and types of books they were looking for. And I can tell you that science fiction isn't way up there on the list. Other things, though, like graphic novels, are very hot right now. And so if you're an aspiring graphic novelist, it's a good time to try the agency route before you try the self-publishing route.
Okay. So what would you say was the easiest part of the publishing process for you?
I think the easiest really was that vertical integration of being able to do everything, every part of the production process through Amazon, through their website, and having it all come together relatively quickly. I spent about 11 months on writing the book and editing it and getting it to a point where I was comfortable with publishing it. And really, it only took me about a month to put it through the process with Amazon. So it was a relatively small part of the overall investment in time.
Okay. And in terms of cover art, how did you arrive with the cover that you picked?
On this book, I did the cover art myself. I used a digital painting program to create the cover. And I will admit that's one thing where I think on the next one, I may do things differently, whether I go through a professional artist or whether I just do the cover a bit differently. I feel like that's one area where I will try to improve for the next book. I feel like the cover that I have is okay, but it's not grabbing quite like I'd like it to.
Okay. How did you discover that Amazon was going to be an option for publication?
When I was looking at publishing options, I surveyed what was out there in terms of places that would publish your book. I certainly discovered a few of the vanity publishers where they would publish your book in exchange for a commission. There's one other big name in the self-publishing business, Ingram Spark, that I know some authors who go through. They're another relatively large player in this field, not quite as vertically integrated, not quite as easy of a process to follow. And so after I had surveyed the options, Amazon seemed to make sense to me, and I decided to go that route. And in subsequent conversations with other local authors, I find a lot of other people have come to the same conclusion. I'm not trying to push Amazon specifically, but it just seems that they've created a good product that the self-publishing community is gravitating toward for ease of use and ease of distribution.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you, Jordan. I know one other author who has also been on this show, and they had a bad experience, but I think that they went down the ISBN from Amazon Path versus
Mm.
obtaining it themselves. However, when I attended your seminar, that I was surprised to learn that that's how you had published. But based on the stories you've told about how easy it was, how much flexibility and control you have, you've convinced me that that's the way that I should go when I'm ready to do it.
I don't own any stock in Amazon, so I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other, but for me,
Fair
it worked
enough.
out well.
So, do you have any warnings for somebody who's going down this path? Lessons that you learned that you wish maybe you had known before you started?
The big one was the one I mentioned about it being a binary choice whether to go self-publishing or go through an agent in a traditional publishing route. I started looking at agency options when I had already written the majority of the book. And I was a little dismayed to find that what I had written wasn't really what agencies were looking for. It wasn't one of the really super popular genres. And bear in mind that agencies are looking for something that's kind of a sure thing. They're looking for something where they know they can market it to a publisher. And so they have categories that they know sell extremely well. And that's kind of a primary filter for them. So if you're trying to figure out what to write and you haven't really written something yet, I would suggest that one thing is to just take a look at what agencies are looking for, what genres are popular, and that may give you some inspiration. If that's not what you want to write, well, that's okay too. I definitely have some advice for writers and for those who want to self publish about the creative process. One thing is that it's a long haul. As I mentioned, for me, the project was over a year. I think this next book is going to be multiple years. And that length of time, that length of commitment to a project may seem daunting. I would urge you not to get hung up on that, the length of the overall project, but instead to think about just taking it a step at a time. Work on writing a few pages every day. It doesn't mean that everything that you write will make it into the final book, but it will help you to improve your craft as a writer. And you may only keep 50% of what you write, but just by getting that down, you'll have material to work with when you go to put the final book together. Certainly, it also helps to read a lot and to read books that are similar in genre to what you're considering writing, just to see how other authors do it, and also to make sure you're not writing the same book as somebody else, which is a challenge just because there is so much out there these days. For me, I find it's helpful to work on multiple projects at once, and that may seem a little bit contradictory, but I find that cross-pollination is really important. I think that many writers will find that they get stuck at one point or another. And to be able to just shift to a different project for a bit and to focus your energy where you feel like the words are flowing and it's really coming out, I think that's what you want. You'll be able to sense for yourself when you're writing well and when you're just kind of forcing it and trying to make it work. And if you've got multiple projects and you can flex back and forth, you can focus on the project that's really flowing at that time, and it will make the process easier. So paradoxically, having a couple different projects, very different in nature, is okay. Having something fiction and nonfiction to work on at the same time, that's fine. You can also intersperse with that other forms of creative media. So I even find that watching movies or listening to music and certainly reading other books all provide good inspiration.
Okay. Thank you. That's great advice. So, one of the things I know that I mentioned earlier that Jordan and I are friends, one of the things I want to make sure that I get in before we move on to another subject is Jordan and I shared an event together that is, for us, for me personally, it's a once in a lifetime thing. Jordan has probably done it more than once, and I'll have to ask you that. But Jordan and I ran the Detroit Half Marathon together with my wife and some neighbor friends of ours. This was back before COVID, the year before COVID, actually. And so that was a pretty big deal. If you don't know, the Detroit Half Marathon goes through downtown Detroit, across the bridge into Canada, uh, through downtown Windsor, and then through the tunnel back into Detroit. So anyway, just want to throw that out there that Jordan for a while was also a member of our church's running group. And Jordan, do they still do the church's running group?
I'm not sure about that, actually.
Yeah, I don't know either. Um, so the Jordan, I want to hit you with two personal questions. Just out of curiosity, I have a tendency to do this. I know that you went back and studied some of my previous episodes. So Jordan, you get to go back in time to meet with 10-year-old Jordan. You get to give him one piece of advice. What is that advice?
It's interesting that you picked age 10, just because that's the age that my daughter is now, and it's also the approximate age of reader that I was targeting with the book. Although I ended up finding out later that it's really written for an older audience than that, and I need to fill you in on that story. But to loop back to your question, you know, I almost don't want to give 10-year-old Jordan advice. And the reason I say this is because as a 10-year-old, I was pretty nerdy. I was very academic. I was very socially aloof and really wasn't too concerned with what was going on around me, but was just happy being who I was and happy learning stuff and pursuing knowledge. And it was a good phase in my life. So even though there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know, I was having a good time figuring it out. And it was a happy phase of life before you get into the teenage years and you start to worry a lot more about what everybody else is thinking about you. So I almost don't want to give Jordan advice, but what I would say to Jordan is, I wish I could just instill in my earlier self an awareness of the wonderful other people who supported me at that phase of my life. Teachers, Boy Scout leaders, mentors who were there even though I didn't realize they were there. People who cared about me and supported me and helped me at that phase of my life. And there were a lot when I go back and look at it. And I think at that age, at 10 years old, that was probably somewhat invisible to me. And so I would just tell myself, be more appreciative, or at least be appreciative, because you've got a lot of special adults and other people around you who are there watching over you and helping you all along the way, especially when you're at 10 years old.
That's pretty profound advice, in my opinion. Jordan, who has been your greatest inspiration in achieving your goals?
It wouldn't just be one person. And I say that for a couple of reasons. I feel like my life hasn't been a singular pursuit in one direction. It's really been more like a series of phases. And you go in one direction for a while and you accomplish certain goals and then go in a different direction. And so I haven't modeled my career or my aspiration on any one person and said, I want to be like them. But what I have felt is that there have been people who have provided support or inspiration at different phases in my life. And I have probably half a dozen people easily where I think of them as key influences in my life who helped me either to inspire me from a standpoint of academics or personal fitness or music, and just helping to push me to accomplish more than I ever realized I could accomplish on my own. So there have been a lot of people like that in my life.
Okay, that's fair. So just for the audience, to give them a little bit of background, Jordan isn't just an author, and he very, very briefly mentioned some of his career, but I shared with Jordan my opinion earlier of people who do what he does, but I want to share just for the audience. Jordan's an engineer in the automotive industry, and I know that if you're not familiar with the automotive industry, you probably only think about the car dealership down the street, or the blue collar folks you've heard about on the news who put the cars together. But there's so many heroes behind the scenes that have been behind so many major advancements like airbags, seat belts, OnStar, just all these cool things that keep us safer, and a lot of the really tiny little things like anti-lock brakes and the skidding systems so the car doesn't go out of control. So Jordan, I appreciate what you do every day to really make an impact on society, and I think it goes unsaid a lot. So Jordan, if I could, and this is a question Jordan didn't have privilege to before the show, is there a specific project that you're able to plug that you were a part of that is probably gone unnoticed by the majority of America?
Yes. I can't talk about it yet, but we'll say that you'll be able to drive it within the next few months. One of the vehicles that I worked on, what I do is primarily turbocharger development. So a turbocharger is an engine component that generally makes engines more efficient and more powerful. A lot of the modern engines that automakers make these days are turbocharged engines. And I'm fortunate to have worked on a lot of different turbochargers. Well, one of those turbochargers will be hitting the market soon. It was one that I worked on for several years, and so I'm excited to see it come out. I have driven the test vehicles with that engine in it. It's a brand new engine to the market, and it's great. What we've been able to do is take a much larger engine that consumed a lot more fuel and make an engine that's better for the environment, lighter in weight, gets better mileage, but equally powerful and with even more torque, so a good driving feel. And that'll be hitting the market soon. So, what you're saying is definitely true. There are many, many engineers behind the scenes who go into a product like that. You have something like 2,000 parts in an engine, and you have engineers who own all of those parts and ensure that they meet the quality and safety standards for the vehicle. So it's a really important role.
Yeah, well, it's one that I think we take for granted, but it's certainly, I don't know many people who can't speak to some of the safety features making their lives better or even saving their life. So I can also tell you that there's a huge chunk of my audience that will love whatever it is that's coming soon. A huge chunk of my audience loves fast cars, powerful cars. So I'm excited about that as well. And I want to just ask this one last question. So well, there's two last questions, but they're kind of the same. So have you considered, and are you legally able to at some point write a book about some of the projects? Because I personally am fascinated by books written about how the technology came to exist. And I say this because so many people focus on the success story of what became, and they don't focus enough on how many iterations it took and just different obstacles and hurdles and setbacks to get there. And I think that story is just so compelling. So Jordan, from an engineer's perspective, do you think you'll ever write a book telling some of those stories?
I sure hope so. Right now, anything that I generate in terms of intellectual property belongs to my employer. So it's a gray area. Right now, I can't put anything out there. But I think it's a great subject for a book, too. I'm definitely fascinated by the history of technology. And before I worked in automotive, I worked in aerospace and was working on developing turbo pumps for liquid rocket engines. And I've ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated by aviation and aerospace. And so, what is likely to happen is I will write something about aviation and aerospace and technology evolution in those areas. Um, and I've been taking pictures of airplanes for years and years too, as just kind of a side interest. And I'm thinking that one of the things that I'd like to put together is a historical retrospective looking at how aviation has changed and grown up as an industry.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to that when that becomes a reality. So, Jordan, this is really the last question, I promise this time. Do you have any plans for public appearances, book readings, or signings anytime soon?
The next time that you can catch me at a public appearance will be in May at the Northville Library's Author Fair. So Northville is in southeast Michigan. It's not too far from where I live. And I'll be making an appearance there along with many other local authors, uh, most of whom, in my experience, are self-published when you go to these author fairs. So that's an opportunity. And then, John, as you mentioned, I did a seminar at my local public library about the self-publishing process. And I did that just because I felt like I learned a lot in the process, and I wanted to share it with other people. I feel like there's probably many people who are sitting on great book ideas or have written something down and are wondering what the next step is. And so what I wanted to do was share some information to say the next step is achievable. And you can be a self-published author, and it maybe isn't as hard as you think. So I put that seminar together and presented it earlier this year along with a friend of mine. And yeah, we had an excellent reception. We had an excellent turnout from the public. And so I'm sure we'll offer that again, probably in 6 to 12 months' time.
Okay. Yeah, I attended that. I thought it was well put together, and for me it was a bonus. My daughter plays basketball in Brandon, and so I subscribed to all the community stuff, and I got a notification that there would be a discussion about self-publishing. I was like, I need to learn, and then come to find out, my friend is leading it. So that was a bonus for me. I was pretty excited about that. So. Jordan, I want to thank you very much for doing this. This is just a real passion project for myself, as I live vicariously through other authors who've had the courage to get their work done and get it out there. And there's a group of people who know I've been working on a book for a while, and every time I talk to them, that's one of the first questions they ask is, "How's the book coming along?" And it'll get there. My goal is to have it ready to be published this year. In the year 2024. So we'll see. If you're
Awesome.
watching this in 2025 and the book isn't out there yet, I failed. So you can find Jordan's book on Amazon. The link, if you're watching this on YouTube, the link is below in the comments. Anywhere that you're watching this video, if I've posted it, the link to that Amazon page is in the comments. Please check it out. And you can, Jordan, thank you again. I'm super excited about this. And I appreciate everybody for watching. And I hope you've taken some away from this. If you want to be an author, I'm sure you can reach out to Jordan with any questions you have. And if nothing else, you have a new book to add to your reading list. And the book is very affordable. It's $12 on Amazon. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure to be here. And yeah, absolutely. If anyone is looking for writing advice or feedback, happy to help. Would really like to hear from you. So thanks, everyone.